Oh, good evening, and and welcome to SlushHeap 12. Boy, I'm starting out good. Tonight's subject is researching for authors, and I hope that I learned something from this. I don't even know what the title means, but I assume we're going to do some researching on all kinds of subjects, and from what I'm told, it should be a lot of fun, a lot of laughs. We have a new host tonight. And that is John Rakestraw. He's all the way on your left. The guy with the funny little ears. He was supposed to wear his Mickey Mouse ears tonight, but refused to. So I got to call Google to see if we can get a -1 for him instead of a +1. Our next guest is Joseph. Oh boy, and Joseph, you told me. Giacalone?
Giacalone, yep.
Giacalone. There you go. You know, when you get my age, you're lucky to remember your name, so... welcome to the show.
Thanks, man.
I understand that you have a lot to contribute, and you have already in the past at other shows, so I'm anxious to hear what you have to say. We'll see what we can do to get my questions in there then. Our next guest is Marguerite Ashton, and Marguerite, I did my background on you, and let me tell you something. I don't know if I want to have you on my case because I wouldn't get away with it, you know, and I don't know if that's good or bad, but I assume that it is good, and there's going to be some questions there why authors would want to know all the things you know. And then we have a newcomer. You know what? We don't even have a title for Harlan yet, but Harlan Smith is a regular on a lot of our shows that our friends have out, especially John on his life events. Harlan is a guest quite often, and what a character. And you'll know what I mean by the end of the night. You know, Harlan can argue with the best of them. And of course...
Don't worry about my name. I have to sing a whole chorus of happy birthday to come up with something when people ask me my name.
Oh, you do? Can you do that at the end of the show?
Probably not.
Oh, okay. Then we'll vote for the end of the show. And I'm Rudy Fisher, along with my other co-host, Miss Beauty. You know what? You don't even have your name. I forgot now. Oh, Darcy.
Yeah. Oh.
Because I look at your name there, it says SlushHeap. So I didn't know that maybe you changed your name over the week. So anyhow, welcome Darcy to Ronzio, right? To Ronzio, something like that.
Duranzo. Duranzo.
All of them are doing it to me tonight. But tonight's show should be a good one. Like I said, it is researching, and you know. If I could just get 2 words in here right now, I didn't do much research when I did my book, and I think I'm paying the price, still paying the price. So I have a lot of questions for our guests for tonight, myself. But Darcy, I'll give you the pleasure of starting it.
Okay. I actually did do some research before the show. Go figure. I was looking. I just wanted to look up the topic of research. I think that the reason why this topic really hit home for me is because I have an interest in books that are set back in time. And obviously an author writing today about centuries past does not have personal experience. So they must rely on research. And I know that with Joseph and Marguerite, they're really helping the crime fiction genre specifically with that same issue. Not everyone has that sort of experience, so you've got to learn it from somewhere. And I found this article that I really, really appreciated by an author named Robin Hathaway. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of her. And she's talking about the fact that extrapolation becomes a major issue when people don't have the experience themselves. And I thought it was a good way to start the show, just to mention that her quote that she used, which actually came from her grandfather, was, "You don't have to stick your head in the garbage to know that it stinks." So if you can take your personal experiences and apply them elsewhere, then you can still write convincing material even if you haven't lived it yourself. So I would like to start on that topic, and I'm going to shoot to Marguerite because she has had a lot of experience with helping other authors do research, and she has obviously researched for her own books. So Marguerite, how is it that you got started in this genre?
Well, I've loved to write since 2000, and I decided to take it seriously about in '09. And during that time, I was working down at the State Public Defender's Office, and for a little bit more, I did intake down at the jail. And it's just always something that has, I guess the word would be, fascinated me, and I really enjoyed law enforcement in itself. So before I was getting ready to go into the academy, I learned that I was getting ready to start a family, so that wasn't possible. And my husband suggested, he said, why don't you do what it is that you enjoy? And that's putting the writing and law together in one thing, and then there you go. You can still have the joys of doing your research. I knew some of the things. I didn't know everything about the law. And writing in itself, and so it came together that way, and I fell in love, and I've just stuck with it.
Yeah, and you've done a fabulous job. I mean, you've built quite a community, and you've joined communities yourself, but actually you and Joe have recently started something on Google Plus for people who share the same interests. Can you tell people a little bit about that community before we get started?
Yes, Joe and I came up with the idea of having the Google Plus community. It's called Crime Writers Panel, and that's something that Joe and I work on with some other law enforcement members. And the important thing was, it's like a one-stop shop for writers. It's where you can go if you're writing anything regarding law, mystery, crime fiction, probably just about any writer. If you need to deal with something that has to do with law, procedure, they're there, and they volunteer their time to help out other authors. So they can go to this community, be a part of it, post, ask questions of the law enforcement members, and we also, ourselves, Joe and I, anything that we do, whether interviews or posts that we write, Joe will let me use his, and I'll post it up there. He'll post things, and that way they can use this as a research. So it's like an online library, and that's how that works.
That's excellent. Now, what suggestion would you make to people that aren't necessarily in the crime genre, but would like that same kind of education from others? I mean, how was it that you reached out to people?
I think that, I'm sorry, Darcy, can you clarify the question? The last three words I didn't understand. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was saying, how was it that you sought out people when you were looking for your own research?
Okay, thank you. Yes, networking, which I really enjoyed, and I started where I said, this is insane, because I would go online to research a particular scene or how it would be handled, and I was not getting what it was I needed. I was not finding the answers. And so I started Criminal Minds blog, and I said there has to be some way to get the information that we need, research, so that we can write our books. Well, I started networking. Joe was the first person that I ran into when we were talking and networking, and I said, I asked him if he could start writing some posts to help my writers, because I would get questions because they wanted to know how things worked, and I didn't know everything, so I had to go to Joe. And so I would go to Joe and say, Joe, can you help me out? And he loved it, and he started helping me out, and it just kept going from there, and we just kept it going. And Joe has done awesome with coming up with ideas to say, well, Marguerite, we should do this, and I'm like, yeah, you're right, and we can help writers this way. Yeah, you're right. And even actually too, just in general, certain things, even such as simple as a court scene, it may not be a crime fiction book, but anything such as simple as a court scene or how you handle an arrest for your scene, you can go there. So it's not just all for crime writers.
That's bad. And for those who didn't see Joe on, well, John Rakestraw had him on his show recently on Rakestraw Live Events, and Joe did a great job there. But for those who weren't able to see it, Joe, do you want to tell people a little bit about your background and why you'd be best qualified to answer questions like those thrown at Marguerite?
Yeah, how you doing, guys? Rudy and Darcy, thanks for having me on the show tonight, and good to see the other friends out there. And we have actually a new friend up there that just popped in. How you doing?
Katie, welcome, Katie.
I thought I was cursed. I thought I wasn't going to be able to get in at all. Finally! I could throw my
Careful,
computer.
Joe. You opened Pandora's box there.
Yes, sir. I spent nearly 21 years in the New York City Police Department. One of my jobs, I was the commanding officer of the Bronx Cold Case Homicide Squad. I had responsible for over 4,000 open homicides, missing persons, old sexual assaults, those kind of things. And that was my job. It was me and 4 detectives, and we were responsible for all those cases. But I was actually responsible for even more because I had to cover the other boroughs also. So unfortunately, I had a lot of experience dealing in murder and those kind of things, and it kind of put me on the path because I'm an adjunct professor at John Jay College. Also, I've been there for about 7 years now, and I teach the students in all the different aspects of criminal investigation. And I was using criminal textbooks, and I'm like looking at these things, and I'm like, they're not actually teaching anything anybody. That's what kind of made me write my own book. And I had mentioned on John's show that I never anticipated writers or crime writers as a market for me. So when I created a plan, and you'll hear me this way if I was on John's show, I always talk about a plan. Every writer's got to have a plan. We'll talk about that another time. But I didn't include them in there because I didn't even think about them. But they are actually next to police departments. They're my biggest. I wouldn't say fans because they're buying my books. I don't know if they're a fan or not, but they found that my book is important enough. So I guess that's the only thing that matters to me. So when I was doing things for Marguerite, she had asked me, "Can you write some things?" And I never even really thought twice about it. I said because I never constituted a crime writer as part of my audience. So I said, sure, I'll write it because that was she was running the blog, and my blog is something totally different. I do a blog, the Cold Case Squad, where more towards law enforcement. And now she had asked me to do something for writers, and I said sure because it's not it's not on my spot for a blog. It's not a good post for me. So I said sure. We were banging out a couple of posts, and then all of a sudden we getting emails from people and how about that? I'm like, what is going on? So yeah, we hit it off pretty good, and Marguerite and I was a prime example about networking, meeting people online. I mean, we've never met in person. We've just, we met online via Twitter, I think we started.
Yep.
And then the rest you say is history. So you can build these relationships up there, and when we get into it a little bit, I mean, this is the best kind of research. If you just find experts in the field who are willing to help you out, I mean, this is the way to go.
Now, Marguerite, when you were seeking out someone like Joe, how did you go about finding him in particular on Twitter? I mean, what did you search for to find someone like him?
Oh my gosh, what did I remember it was on Twitter. Oh, I think it had to do with the cold case, and I had come across his blog. I found him on Twitter and was reading his post, and he was also in a live chat on Twitter, and that's how I got to see what Joe had to offer, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I contacted him and started talking to him about, I think I had a question about how I would write a scene, for serving a warrant. I think that's what that was for.
That was the first, I was going to say, it was a search warrant. Yeah, how do you do a warrant?
Yeah, search warrant. And he helped me out. He said, sure, no problem. And then he also suggested his book. And out of all the other books that I have read, research in law, his was the most simple, and it had everything that I had questions for, and I fell in love with that book, and I have both editions, and they go everywhere with me. So that is how Joe and I contacted him, and it just, like we said, it just went from there, and he helped me out, and I said,
I'll hand you the extra money now for the thing.
Yeah.
Here's the $50 bill. I'll pass it over.
Well, Joe, so actually, your way of looking at it is almost twofold. One side of you is there to help the real people who handle the crime, to make them a little more aware by using your experience, your years in doing it, solving their cases. I mean, they can actually call you, write to you, get in touch with you, and ask you questions. Because I did see that on one of your things. You said that you're open to people that have cold cases to get in touch with you, right?
Yep, and I do it too. I'm part of a group that does it.
Okay, and then on the other hand, you found a new niche, and that is the people that write only. They're not really involved in it. Instead of writing about how to take bananas out of a banana tree, they want to know how do you kill somebody and get away with it. Oh, no, wait a minute, that was John's question. Sorry. John was asking that last week, wasn't he? You know, and we'll get that answer later on again. But the thing is, you know, it's nice that you have those two niches. Now, let me ask you this. Let's take the authors for just a minute, because that's what we're after, the authors. Of the ones you've seen, let's take the ones that we've seen on television. How would you grade the shows that you've seen on television, such as Cold Case? There was a show out of Philadelphia called Cold Case. Okay. Unfortunately?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. You're dealing with a case that's 30 years old. They close it with 45 minutes with 3 commercials.
That's not bad, is it?
Yeah, well, I guess for television it's great, but in reality that couldn't be further from the truth. So if like anybody was writing a cold case story, there are so many things, there are so many different facets. It's different than a regular homicide. I mean,
I understand that, right?
Yeah.
But
So
I mean, what
it's
they
a
did
niche.
present, other than the time frame being totally inaccurate, what they did present in a show like that, what kind of grade would you give that?
Probably a C minus. So understand something. I'm not a big fan of these crime television shows just because I get aggravated watching what I see on television, because most of it is so far from reality that it's, you know, people actually believe it.
I did.
Yeah, well, of course, a lot of people do, but it's not your fault because you've been bombarded with these images. And I spoke about it on John's thing about the Miranda issue, even how people have screwed that up so much just from watching television.
No,
So,
actually, there was a reason why I believed in it, and that's the reason I asked you about the Cold Case.
are we there?
Oh,
Yeah, I think we lost Rudy, but that's okay.
I think we lost him. But I think
yeah.
that's interesting that you bring up the Miranda thing. I mean, obviously there's going to be crime writers watching tonight because of our guests. So what would you tell people who are trying to write that sort of thing?
The simplest thing to remember for a crime writer. Now, listen, we don't want you to be perfect, right? Because you have a little literary license that you could do. But for instance, certain things that you got to be able to do in interrogation plus custody equals Miranda. So if you look at that formula, so if you're going to interrogate your suspect or your character in this case, and he's in custody, which means he's under arrest, that means you have to read a Miranda. Now, it's not it's not read to the guy out on the street like they do on television for that dramatic effect. You know, that doesn't happen. You know, it's done in the interrogation room. It's done, you know, with a form. It could be videotaped. There's a lot of different aspects of it, just so that you don't have anybody trying to challenge it.
Okay.
That's great. Yeah.
Was I the only one that got bumped out?
Yes.
Oh, geez, then I didn't even hear the answer to my question, did I?
I didn't hear the question actually either, so if you want to repeat it, go ahead.
Well, the question was about the Cold Case. I said I was actually, the reason I was asking for it, that particular show was my son's show. That's what he does, and so next time I'm going to give you, I'm going to give your name to him. The next show he does on that subject, he better get it right then.
Well, listen, I mean, C minus is a tough grade, but understand something. It's what people.
It's not
like.
acceptable in the Fisher family.
Right, but you know what though? That's coming from my point of view. When in respect,
I understand that.
I have a different, I look at life differently, than the average viewer does. I mean, the average viewer thinks that this is, great stuff and this is what happens and this is how these things do. I mean, knock on someone's door 20 years later and they knock on your door and you say, we're investigating this case, and I had this little old lady ask me, she says, you're still looking into this case? Like you haven't solved this case yet? So, I mean, there's a lot of other aspects about it, but the reason why I kind of like poo-pooed the cold case thing too is because these cases, this is the toughest investigation that you have out there, and sometimes it's marginalized on a TV show because you only have 45 minutes to do it.
But it's supposed to be entertainment in that case. Now, in the case of authors, isn't that really also supposed to be entertainment? And if you get too technical in there, could you lose the audience?
Yeah, well, when I refer to like trying to give it that real feel look, the real feel, that's what you're looking for. You're not looking for the too technical aspects because, but I mean, if you listen, John Grisham has made, not John Grisham, Tom Clancy has made a killing on on being technical. I mean, you write 700-800-page books, and it's just one technical detail after another. It's like reading stereo instructions. So.
Okay.
I mean, if that's what if that's the kind of thing you like. I mean, for me, I want to see, that whole literary license is fine by me, but there are certain aspects that just have to be done right.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say what we're talking about is like what we did on my show when we talked about the stabbing or slicing. Is that the difference is with the stab wound, you rarely see blood splurting everywhere. But if you want blood splurting everywhere, then we have to see a slash move. So in the book, if you want the blood to be up against the wall and on the ceiling, we better make sure that person wasn't just stabbed 39 times, because what you would find is a body on the ground with blood all around it, but you wouldn't find blood all over the other place unless you got into a main artery. So that's the difference that Joe's talking about, or taking evidence and putting it in plastic bags, especially DNA evidence. Bad. I mean, you would wrap it up in paper, because then the evidence can also be cut off the paper that you did down the road, and that can be analyzed because there's DNA in the paper now. So now you have DNA where it needs to be in a plastic bag. It could be deteriorated or contaminated. So there's all these different things. So that's what Joe's talking about. The technical side of it, sure, nobody's going to sit there and want to go through a real interrogation and what it goes like and how long they go. It's like a court case. We understand that you don't see a real court case on TV because they're boring. They really are. It takes forever, and everybody does the evidence, and then they do the evidence again, and then they go through their summation going through all the evidence again. It's boring as heck. But we do Perry Mason, but that's what people expect. So Joe's just asking a little research, and we could have a better understanding of the process, and we could have cops actually going, hey, I like this book.
Right. I'll bring up a sticking point that I always seem to have. And even with some of the TV personalities that talk about crime shows, I won't mention her by name, but just know the difference between the manner of death and cause of death. I mean, there's actually even a third part called mechanism of death that people just confuse it. And I'm talking about people who are on TV that make a lot of money talking about crime shows, don't even know the difference between manner of death and cause of death, and it just drives people like me crazy. Now, that's my problem, of course. That's nobody else's problem. But if you want to entertain your readers and you want to keep them coming back for more, if you can just give them those little tidbits and get that information in there, I think they keep on coming back.
And I think that probably applies to any style of writing. I mean, John, you've written your own book, and it's set in an era that you weren't alive for. Certainly you had to do research, and you had to get those facts straight, or it's going to be, it's going to fall flat.
Well, I think Holland consulted on that one, right?
His girlfriend was that lady with the ring on the boat. That was his girlfriend.
Yeah, well, because I'm actually 10,000 years old. So.
There you go.
So I've been around for a long time. No, you're right. You do your research. Now, I would like to take credit for a lot of that, but I can't. I'm the story idea guy. I'm the one who puts all the plot points, figures it all out. The one who makes it all magical and all that wonder is my beautiful and wonderful wife, Toni Rakestraw. She's the real writer. I'm a great story guy. I'm a great, wonderful story, and I write out great stuff, and I come up with great names and great plot points, and read all the conspiracies, and then she takes it all and and makes that into a beautiful story. So I want to give her credit because I'm the meats and potatoes, and she's the one who does all the great finishing work. She's the
sauce
Hemingway.
and gravy.
That's it. That's it. She's an amazing lady. So.
But so Katie, we haven't even said hi to you yet.
Yeah,
Hi. Sorry.
No, that's okay. But John brings up a good point about having someone that's going to go in there and finish things. And you've been working with the community in Geneva, the writing community in Geneva. Is that something that you guys do as a community? Is to go through and iron out those inaccuracies?
No, not necessarily. Not that kind of inaccuracy. In terms of research, no. What we do is in terms of having other writers critique our work, we say, okay, this doesn't sound right or that doesn't sound right. However, you have to do the research. I think no matter what, for example, the book I wrote, which was on astral projection, it's paranormal. You know, most people would say it's complete fantasy in a sense, and yet you have to do the research in order to make it seem as close to real as possible. And I think that's that's like what John's talking about. My sister is a head medical examiner in Tampa, and she watches those crime shows too, and she just goes nuts because she's like, oh, I hate these shows. It's so wrong. And for the average person, everyone's like, oh, these are such great crime shows, But I think there needs to be a happy medium in terms of the research that you do. I think every writer isn't going to get everything 100% right, because otherwise all we would be doing is do research. But you need to get it as close to real as possible so that the reader isn't pulled out of the story when they're reading, and all of a sudden they see something they know isn't true, and that pulls you right out of the story. In my experience.
Harlan, do you feel the same way?
There are people that live for that, to find that spot where it's inaccurate and tell you how many times that inaccuracy occurred in a book or in a movie. I can't talk about crime because, certainly I'm far removed from ever committing a crime, because I would have been deported back to Switzerland by now, So we'll leave that alone. But just to compare, did anybody ever see Dr. Strangelove? The movie?
On purpose?
Oh.
No.
Well, the funny thing, there were actually two of them that came out at the same time, and the second one, which was the better one of the two, the title at the moment escapes me. But now there is something I could compare with, and I can see, Joe, where you're going with what you're saying, because flying is my passion.
Are you talking about Failsafe?
That's it. The second one was Failsafe.
Yeah, with Walter
and the first one was Dr.
Matthau
Strangelove.
and Henry Fonda. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And both of them, the book and the movies were so inaccurate, but everybody that I talked to, you were entertaining, was fantastic. We didn't know you could sit on a bomb and ride it down like a cowboy. I mean, come on, let's be realistic. But if that's what entertained them, I'm going to have to let them have it. But I can understand where you could go off the deep end, because I know I did. First of all, get it right what they're flying in. Secondly, get it right what they're looking at. Where'd you get your information from? Where's your research on that particular thing? And I think, Joe, you probably feel the same way sometimes. If you happen to come across one of these shows, I don't think you'll watch them on purpose the way I don't either.
No, I look at it this way. There are so many people out there that are experts in the field who are willing to help you. All you have to do is ask. I mean, listen, if I'm going to research something that I have no idea about, which is basically I should have researched more about before I got married, right? So I would have been knowing more about that. But there's something. Yeah.
There isn't enough research out here.
So no, not to get us off topic, but all kidding aside, no, seriously. I mean, if there was something that I was going to write about that I had no idea what I was going to write about, the first thing, my first research thesis, I look at it as, find me an expert who I can, who either I know or I trust. And if I could talk, like the kind of things like what Marguerite and I, she'll be on something and she'll send me a text message and say, I need help. I mean, those are the kind of people that you want to find so that you can get the information and get it done and get it right and not have to worry about, like, do I have to check the information that the researcher is giving me too? Because that could be a whole other problem. So you need to vet people. You need to make sure they are who they say they are, and they're capable of doing it. One of the things is, it's like having a confidential informant. How reliable is the information, and how reliable is your informant? And that's basically the way you have to operate and how to do things.
Okay.
Now, Marguerite, you have a whole community. What Sisters in Crime? Sisters in Crime, is that what it's called?
Yeah, I'm a member of Sisters in Crime.
Okay, and so do they feel out to see how valuable the members are? Can anyone join? I mean, how do you know what the information is going to be like in that?
I know that they ask questions, and usually it's basically just for mystery and crime writers. I joined because that was before Joe. That was an area for me to get in and just learn about publishing and mystery and what it was what did I need to do to get on the right track, so that business-wise, professional-wise, and that's what they suggested. It was suggested to join Sisters in Crime, and I love it. They give a little bit of everything from articles to the members that you probably can't get any elsewhere. So I'm really glad that I joined. It really helps a lot.
And speaking of Sisters of Crime, I've done in-person engagements, speaking engagements for them. They've had me come. They're a great organization. I've been with the Manhattan, the New York City Sisters in Crime, and actually on the 27th I'll be talking to the Long Island Sisters in Crime. So they offer a lot of different things. I mean, it's a great organization, and it's just not for women. I mean, there are men involved in this. I mean, this is how you can build a network too. And and they'll ask people like me. I mean, I do it free of charge. I don't get paid for it. So I go there, give my own time. I do my own traveling. But you get a chance to meet a lot of really neat people, and many of them are published numerous books too. I mean, but they always looking to learn more. So if you're willing to just find out, you find a local group by you. But you got to look for a group that also wants to give. A lot of people want to go to these things and just just take whatever they can take out of them, and then they leave. That kind of stuff.
Right. Right.
Well, I know what Sisters in Crime too. That's also another thing. They help writers attend conferences. So, like last year, I went to the Writers Police Academy down in North Carolina, and because I was a member, it helped pay the fee so that I could go. So.
Oh, that's great.
That's great. So what I really like about this is that we've gone to the other side of research, and that research isn't always just about what you're going to write about, but it's also research about the craft of writing, that it is a craft, that we have to learn this thing called writing. There's structure, there's groups out there to get together with, like the sisters who do that. Also, Katie has her group that gets together and helps writers with the concept of writing, that the research has to be there, finding those avenues of how to publish, how do I write, how do I make sure my writing is where it's at. And that's the other part that writers need to learn, because at times it seems like there's a lot of people out there who think all I have to do is put words on a page and I'm a writer. And it's like, no, just because I can hit a stick and hit a piece, a rock and across my yard doesn't mean I'm a baseball player. There is a craft, there is a finesse, there is an expertise in this, in that just because you want to write, you just don't go off and write your first little thing and say, hey, I'm a writer. You need to learn the craft. I mean, I know that Joe, when he wrote his first book, just remember, his first book was about what he does. So his first book was taken from the fact that he's written, probably by that time, I don't know, how many little crime, you have your paperwork, you must have filled out thousands and thousands of pages of how to do this crime stuff. So when you went to write your book, and why you're able to do it in 6 months, was that you had basically lived the book you wrote. And that's different. That's the difference. The research was already there. He already lived the research. The part he had to do research on was, how do I get published? How do I get beyond this thing sitting on paper? How do I get it to a publisher, to an agent, to somebody's hand, so it's in a classroom and I have some recognition? And that's another part of the research that we need to look into.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, what's interesting, though, those that are writing their life experiences are the ones that the rest of us can turn to for reference. I mean, even Rudy's writing his own story. When I need a military question asked.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. Like what Marguerite brought up. First of all, she was talking about networking. And if you go on Google Plus and you look at how many hangout shows there are right now for authors, and they're all independent, if there was ever a network put together, we would have, more than an encyclopedia would hold, as far as information that's available for research. None of that is available right now. That's the first time I heard that in their particular genre, the crime scenes, they actually are starting to put together some information that people can use as research. and it's amazing that it's not done with all the other ones. Definitely, I agree with you what you're just saying. Joe wrote on his own experiences. He didn't need much help other than maybe, well, no, English was his first language.
No,
so
I did have. No, I did have some help with some of the things. Like, I mean, I had a couple of friends who were medical examiners, and actually,
okay, very
second
good.
edition, the second edition, I did a whole expansion of the medical examiner's part, and one of my personal friends helped me out a lot, and I gave her the acknowledgement in the second edition of the textbook. So, yeah, I mean, there's different aspects of there's different things, but write what you know. That's why I always tell people first. Because
as Darcy said, my book is based on my experience, and that's why I said earlier about the movie Dr. Strangelove and Failsafe. Whoever the technical advisor was must have been smoking something. Excuse me, I didn't mean to. Harlan, I didn't mean to refer to anything, but he, the guy just didn't know what he was talking about. But because the people, and I look at it the same way. I was there 24 hours a day. I know what went on. And I don't think you open up necessarily, Joe, or even Marguerite. You open up 100% of what you really know. Because some of the things, it's better off not being said. Where did I read the other day? And I think it was on your notes someplace, Joe, where somebody had asked you how deep you could go into crime scenes and what they look like. I mean, is that a thing you really want to describe 100% to everybody?
Yeah, well, I mean, were you worried about people trying to pull off the perfect crime?
No.
Yeah.
Just that apparently somebody wrote to you one time and asked how much of a crime scene, should you describe, I guess it was.
Okay, Rudy, let's say, hey, Joe, if you were going to describe what it looked like in that classroom where all those poor children were shot by that guy with that high-powered rifle, what would it really look like? And for people to know about half blown off faces and hands gone and the awfulness of what it really was,
you don't need to write that.
Well, I think at times, yes. I think other times, no, because we have to honor the families of those children, and that's. But the other side of it is, if we don't let people know how hideous these things are, then they get Hollywoodized by it, as Joe has said, and we get lost in this glamorizing the use of guns and glamorizing the use of what police work is, when police work is really hard work. It's not some little piece of that somebody's going to pick up something out of the trash and wait a minute, there's the evidence I've been looking for. It's hard,
glamorous.
But John, don't you think? I mean, all of that kind of goes back to the question of what you were saying before, that writing is an art. Writing is something that you learn, and knowing how in detail you're going to go into a crime scene, for example, you have to know your audience. You have to know who you're writing for, why you're writing that scene, and what you want the reader to get out of that particular scene. So if you're writing a textbook, it's completely different than if you're writing, a thriller. So I think that all of that goes back to, in terms of, as a craft, writing as a craft, and how in detail and how much research needs to be done. And I think that for me, my question would be in terms of, how do you know when you're done researching and what to research? Because when I wrote my book, I thought I had researched everything I needed to research, and then somebody called me out on something I had no clue that I had even had to research. I think there are, and I can't even imagine writing a thriller. I would be contacting Joe from day one, through all the way through the writing. But that's a question. How do you know what you need to research, and how detailed you need to go?
Right, and I would, if you asked me a question like that, I mean, it would be a pretty general question. So I'd have to say, well, you're going to have to focus it a little more. Like, what part of it you're really talking about? You're talking about the actual killing, or you're actually talking about the crime scene? You're talking about the investigation, because there's different components of this.
And then what audience, as she brought up, what audience are you going for?
Yeah.
Are we writing this for the television audience? Are we writing this for the crime scene aficionados? Are we writing this to be shocking? there's different ideas. So
well, what the writer has, and Marguerite, I think, will back me up on this. The writer has the ability to engage all the senses. See, this is what you can't do on a television show. I mean, when you walk into a crime scene, you're looking and you're smelling, you're looking, you're feeling, you're touching. There's so many different things. You're listening. I mean, a lot of people, when I mention the term ear witnesses to people, they look at me like, what are you talking about? An ear witness, somebody who heard the gunshots. That's what I'm looking for. I don't necessarily need to see an eyewitness, or if I get an eyewitness, great, but you know what? If you heard it, that's good enough for me too. So those are the kind of things that you can embed into your writing and get those senses in there and let us know what your character's hearing, smelling, thinking, seeing, all these different things.
And that's for everything. I mean, that's not only for crime fiction. That's for, I mean, I just went on a research trip. I actually just came back about, a little over an hour ago, because I wanted to do research for setting in my next novel. Yeah. And it has nothing to do with, the official bullet or anything like that, but I wanted to make sure that when I wrote about this particular area, I knew how green it was, if there's a river running through it, what it smelled like you said, what it sounds like, how many people are around. And, for any kind of writing you do, whether it's poetry all the way up through, nonfiction, you're right. We have all of these senses.
It's all about showing and not telling.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there is something that you just touched on something, Joe. I don't think you've read my book yet. I assume anyhow. And my book, it has to do with the Cold War and the Vietnam War. Now, I thought that by keeping certain things out of the book, I would actually protect the people that are reading it because it may gross them out. But yet, at the same time, if they ever make a movie out of it, which having connections in the business, I'm hoping they will, I was going to put back in again, not the visual effects, but the sound effects that made all the difference in the world. Okay? In the book, you can only describe the sound effects, and you really can't. If I can just take one little excerpt here. I went out on a search and rescue mission, and the person we were looking for was my best friend. And as we landed, he was executed by the Viet Cong. And that was my first ever live fire that I had experienced. I'm an expert marksman, and I probably shot 500,000 rounds out of an M16 just practicing, never hitting anything but targets. But here was my first live fire, and I went bananas. Literally went bananas. I went out of that helicopter and went after, I didn't care how many people were there, I went after him. And the loadmaster on the helicopter, the master sergeant, yelled at me to stop, and I ignored him. And I went down this path in the jungle of Vietnam, and out of this opening came people running the same direction I'm going. And I was after him, and the sergeant kept yelling, stop, stop, stop. And when I finally stopped, two things happened. The person that was closest to me, running the same direction as I was, turned around, pointed his gun, and I could hear this shot fire. And the first thing that went through my mind was, let's see, how did they teach you this? If you hear the shot, you're not dead. So I did hear the shot. I wasn't dead. Then all of a sudden I realized that the air rush from the bullet came from the back of my head to the front of my head. And I turned around very quickly. This all happened within seconds. And there's the master sergeant standing there with his M16. He had fired the bullet and killed the Viet Cong. And from that moment on, it was like a game of dominoes. Because once he fell, the second one is standing there. By now, I have my wits, and I fire. And that one falls. And by the time the second one falls, the third one stands there. And the third one was maybe anywhere between 2'8" and 3 foot tall. And he raised his gun, and I couldn't pull the trigger. And his clicked. And he turned around and he ran. And that's when I was told for the last time, don't you go after him. And as I saw him running away, this little boy, he made a right-hand turn in the jungle. And the next thing was a sound I heard that you cannot imagine. and I don't even think it can be duplicated. I said to my son one day, he said, well, what did you hear? I said, the best thing I can tell you is get a corpse of a pig and take a punji stick and hit him in the head with it, where the stick embeds itself in the head. That's the noise I heard. Now, do I describe that to my people that are reading that book? I did not.
You just did.
You just did.
But you just did.
I did to you, but I didn't in the book.
Well, why not?
I don't know. I don't know. I just
because
didn't
that's was actually kind of riveting. I was actually sitting there, and actually Holland was speechless.
Thank you,
I think we.
But you know what, though, Rudy? That's the kind of fiction that people like myself, I can't talk for everybody else, but that's the kind of stuff I want to read. I want to hear the action. I want to hear the click. I want to hear what you heard. I want all of that stuff. I could feel your heart pounding. I can almost put myself on the scene.
It still does.
You know, I mean, listen, I was involved in a shooting in the police department. I know what it's like in that respect. You know, not in a wartime. It's a little different. You know, just 3 guys with Tech 9 machine guns. That's a whole other story. But the issue that comes down to is that if you can write what you just said, and you know what, now it's on YouTube forever. You could just take it back and write everything you said. That's a great thing about this. But you know, I mean, that's the kind of fiction that I think people and you mentioned all the senses I talked about. You did everything but tell us that the smell of the gun smoke in the air. You know, I mean, of the primer and so. I mean,
you know what? I don't even know if I even smelled that day.
Yeah, I know, but that's where you can have your literary license.
I gave it to you the same way I dream it every night. That's the thing. You know, unfortunately, you know, because and let me tell you something, and Darcy knows. I've been through 5 psychiatrists, and the last one actually was the only one that got close to, you know, solving anything, and I refused to go see him again because the nightmares went away for 3 weeks and came right back again. So there is no.
Still married too? Is that what?
What's that? The one I'm married to?
No, he's still married.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes.
No,
for her.
Rudy.
No, for her. That's not for me. That's not for me. Because now she's coming out and finally talking, and she's saying the same thing. You know, I listened to this for 20 years every night, and I didn't know that. You know,
my dad was the same way, Rudy.
Subject. So you're saying that is what we should put in. That's what we should research.
Absolutely.
No matter what the subject matter is.
We have.
Now, how do you achieve? I'm sorry, Marguerite, I was going to actually go to you anyway. How do you achieve that when you haven't lived it?
Yeah, that touches just the same thing, just what even Kay said. You go to this scene, you go to this spot. For instance, in my upcoming book, I had to learn. I never handled a gun before, but a friend of mine who's in the police department was able to take me. I went to a shooting range because I wanted to know how that felt or to help describe. So it's just all about doing the research. Again, that's as difficult or simple as it may seem, depending on whatever you're writing, whatever scene. Like you think you can write, oh, I heard this shot or whatever, but it's easier if you're there. How did it feel when the gun recoiled to? What did the sound? What sound did you hear? Can you describe how it sounded when the gun went off? Those types of things. And so it's just like Kay said, you go everywhere if you can to try to get a sense of what it is you're writing to describe the scene.
Now, what if you know, this is the question that I like to ask only because there's obviously writers out there who are either just getting started or simply don't have the financial backing to do some of these trips that others can. What advice would you give the author who can't go to that location or go do the thing that they want to write about?
I think for myself, is even just in general, is the networking, and I go back to that only because, or the library, doing the research. Usually, I learned for me that it was a lot easier speaking with somebody, networking. That's how I got in touch with Joe. It's learning from somebody who knows, who's been there. So it's easier, like reaching out, being polite. You know, the same way you handle yourself in person when you meet somebody, you just conduct the same way. use that the same way online, and say I need help, and the majority of them are willing to help, and so that's not something that anybody should be afraid of, but of course you have to approach them appropriately. One of the things like I did before I first started, before I even met Joe, I had called down to the police station in my town just to and talked with a guy. I said, I explained my situation. I'm a writer, and is there somebody that I could speak to that could help me understand what it's like when they go on the scene? And that's how I first learned about first responders. First responders get there before anybody else. And see, I did not know that. So it's just even the littlest things, usually just figuring that out, researching, going on, seeking out somebody through networking is usually the best way, and it's not as expensive either. So it's something that can be done right there without having to pay the money, I think. But you also want to try to offer something in return. And
what do you try to offer in return? Just curious.
Well, for me, for example, at the moment, mine is just for the blog. Anybody that helps me, for my readers, I give them a shout out, or I help promote their book, or whatever it is. If I have some information, I say, hey, feel free to email me. And if I have the time, I'm more than happy to help you out. So it's
Marguerite, you helped me out with doing. See, I had to do some technical writing. I had to do a press release and all those other things. So
yeah.
So I said, I need help with it. I don't know what the hell I'm doing with this kind of writing. So I gave this pile of whatever on a piece of paper, and I gave it to Marguerite. And I'm like, you got to fix this. That's how the relationship works. So, she can ask me stuff, and I help her out. And if I need some technical help on some other type of writing, whatever, listen, nobody's an expert in any of these things. You have to find good people that are willing to help you. I mean, one of the reasons why I've even been on here so much is, because, being on John's, John giving me the opportunity to be on his shows, and even you guys giving me the opportunity to be able there and talk. And it's amazing about how many people don't take me up on my offer. I know I'm be careful what I wish for. I just might get it. But I will help people who all I have to do is ask to send an email. Because I always throw that line out there. Don't send me your entire book and expect me to be able to read it.
Right.
You're looking at a guy who never read a book in high school. And if it didn't come in Cliff Notes, I didn't read it. So. And I proved all my teachers wrong that you couldn't pass a course reading Cliff Notes. I did it. But talk about research, right? Cliff Notes, short version, get to the point, and I still get my grades. So, D for diploma.
Darcy, to answer your question, though, about the fact of a new writer not having the experience and not understanding don't have the life experience to do something, as an actor, I had to play a murderer. I had to, play somebody getting killed, and I've never murdered anybody that I'll tell you about, and and I've never been killed, at least, because I'm still here, So, but you do the magic if, and that is, you think about all the things that you would do if you were in that situation. You start thinking the fear, the exhilaration of whatever it is. If it's love, hate, killing. If you're going to kill someone, there's got to be something that's going to push you to killing. And, there's got to be something beyond whatever anger you've ever had, beyond any, and you start doing the magic if. And that's what you do as a writer. It's called imagination,
Right.
And
it's kind of what you and Kaylee touched on last week when we were talking about voiceover. Just
right.
The whole idea of having something in your life that brought that similar feeling in.
Right. You've been angry. You've been ticked off. I mean, I've been angry enough that I'm ready to tear that person apart. And so you take that anger and you multiply it, because it takes a lot of that to suddenly kill someone. Or fear, or, preservation. There's a whole set of things when you look at it. So a writer doesn't have to actually live any of those moments, but they can take themselves, you know, through their imagination, through those moments, and think about it, and listen to somebody like Rudy, you know, because there was a great description. Here's this young man rushing through because he just saw his best friend killed and all the stuff. My heart was racing. I was with Rudy. I was with him there, ready to pull the trigger just like he was and everything. That's what you remember. You remember those moments, so if you want to write that, now you have that memory. It's embedded right here. You're part there. He just gave you part of that reality. Now you have to give that your reality. If I was in that situation, how would I react? And that's the big if. And I know writers do it. They do it all the time.
Well, Joe, I got another question for you, if you don't mind. The worst thing they ever did for us in the military now is they embed reporters with us, with our units. And I noticed that your job, your ex-job, the police departments now have reporters, have authors with them, right? Isn't that what Castle is all about?
Yeah, that's a Castle thing. I mean, rarely.
Is that really real?
Well, no, we call them ride-alongs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's good because you get somebody who's a little cocky, and then you hand them their bullet-resistant vest, and they're like, "What's this for?"
I don't need that.
I'm like, "You're riding in a police car. You know, people shoot at us every now and then. Well, somebody's gonna shoot at me. You're in a car that says police on it. You never know." And you're like, "No, like really?" And I'm like, you know, she's like, "Is this bulletproof?" And I tell everybody, only Superman's bulletproof, and they don't work well if you get shot in the head. So just put it on and, you know, sit in the back seat. Don't get out of the car. You know, and that was a best, you know, so when, and believe, well, the thing that works with these ride-alongs is that, you know, you're out there responding to jobs. So when you were going out there, they want to get out of the car, you know. It's funny because we get out of the car, there's like a riot going on. You're like, "Hey, why didn't you get out of the car?" You know? What's the matter? What are you doing? They're locking themselves in the back seat. You know, it was pretty funny. But, you know, it's like everything else. It's, you can have a lot of fun messing with people, too.
I'm talking here. I'm talking here.
Another guest showed up there.
We finally hear from Harlan, and he's not even talking to us.
So, Harlan, what is research for you? What do you do for research?
Keep it clean. Keep it clean.
I'm too old for that kind of research. I'm a paranormal writer. I take from some of the Indian religious writings. I use the Seth books, Jane Roberts. And
I love those. Those were great. I love those.
Carlos Castaneda's, all of his books. And as far as police procedures are concerned, I'm more interested in the behavior of the police so that I can
avoid them.
Form my character's behavior around what the police might do.
Nice way to put it.
Yeah, the real contact with police that I made in my writing was in a short story called The Fires of September, in which a professor at UCLA falls in love with a Dutch Asian girl, student, and there's the very old man and the very young woman who have an affair, and she inadvertently poisons herself in a way that no one, absolutely no one, could know how she did it. And you'd have to have some occult knowledge to know what happened. She actually swallowed a gem that poisoned her. And the cop is investigating him. And the conversation is a cat and mouse conversation. I have to change the protagonist from her, the girl, who was wretched in her behavior because she was getting old, even though she was only 22. After she dies, the antagonist becomes the cop, and he's trying to pin her death on the teacher, on the instructor. And the conversation, the cat and mouse between he and the professor, I have to make sound police-like, even though I have no idea what a policeman would say, a detective would say to a man. I had to put myself in the place of an experienced detective and make him at least sound wily, which I did, I thought, successfully. So the professor is off the hook, and the cop still thinks that he killed the girl. So that's the sort of exchange I have with police procedure. I'm more interested in creating a crime that's foolproof than I am in solving one.
Well, where'd you do your research for that book that you said you were able to pull that off then?
Gemology. I used to work for a company that manufactured ultraviolet light sources. I was a copywriter in their advertising department.
Aha.
So I learned all kinds of things about ultraviolet light and the handheld lamps that gemologists use when they're hunting stones. You use that lamp at night, and the stones you want will fluoresce at night. And then in the daytime, you can't tell as well, but you walk around at night, and those stones, they just beam out. They just glow like crazy. There's even a species of scorpion that'll glow under ultraviolet light.
I think I'll go after the stones. Thank you.
But those are my sources. Those and Joe. I've asked Joe a few questions now for something I'm writing at present. And I feel pretty confident with what I've got going so far.
Very good. See, it doesn't, everybody can do it. I like that. And we come right back to the networking. And I have to stay with Marguerite on that one. We have got to look into that a little more, where all of us start networking. Instead of everybody doing their own little research, it has to be, and I think I've mentioned it enough times for our show, we've come up with some really good ideas, but we're not putting them down in our website where people can go and now research. We become the encyclopedia, kind of. And we can give credit to the people that give us that information. You know, it's something we got to think about. We got to hire 10 more people to do all that, you know. But I think that's the biggest problem. But I like that idea, is the fact that if we had more people to go to, you know, because let's face it, you know, we have a second book that's going to be started very shortly, because my book takes more than my life takes more than 2 books. And when I started this show, that's actually the 3rd book already. But I don't know, we'll do our own research for that one. But I think, you know, we touched on so many things tonight that are important that the new authors can look at. And not necessarily are they going to write about crime, but there's a lot of other things. Geez, I hate to pick a topic of romance. I mean, there's got to be ways you can research that. I guess firsthand even, you know. I guess I'll have to...
Look at all the volunteers line up.
What's that?
Look at all the volunteers.
No volunteer on your part?
I recently researched the paranormal for...
Oh, geez.
And that, too, it's fun.
Firsthand or just reading about it?
No. I have a friend, actually, who runs in paranormal circles, as one way of putting it. And she organized...
I call them abnormal circles.
And she organized a channeling workshop.
Oh, geez.
And, you know, like channeling where you take spirits and they're supposed to speak through your body and all of that. And I have to say that I am someone who is of 2 minds. On one hand, I'm like, that cannot exist. And on the other hand, that scares me. Really scares me. But I went. And I'm really glad I went. I don't know exactly what I'll use it for. I did it because I want at some point to write something about it. But I think even that kind of stuff we can research, and it can be mind-blowing, you know. It's not something that I had experience with before. You know, you're talking about your own experiences in your own life, and I think a lot of us start off what we're writing because we've experienced something to some extent, and so then we build on that. But even something completely new, after that completely, I have no idea what I believe anymore after that particular workshop. So I think it can be a lot of fun to try something new.
I have a story that I did on a channeler that might even interest you. It's a short story. It's in my book called Weird Tales. and the fear factor of channeling is really important. It scares the bloody hell out of people for someone to do that. And this girl, Janine, lives in a trailer park, and she begins channeling, and her boyfriend and her best friend, Leanne, are just scared to death. And they're complaining to her about it, and she begins to believe that since her boyfriend and her best friend are trying to convince her that she's crazy, that they must have something going on. So it encourages her to abandon the scene altogether. She leaves and goes to Hollywood and writes a book, and that's how she meets the man who happens to be narrating the story. But you hit on a good point there. The factor of fear that is induced in witnessing a channeler is really important.
Well, I like the fact that Katie also brought up the fact that she doesn't personally believe in it, but she went to there to learn about it because she's thinking about writing about it. And so she was willing to give, past that barrier and say, okay, I got to understand this if I'm going to write about it.
You have to be open-minded, you're saying,
yeah,
right?
You don't even have to be open-minded because you can still say it's a bunch of hooey.
Okay,
but you can look at it.
Right, listen, 21 years in the police department. If you told me there was a pink elephant in the lobby right now, I'd say let's go see it.
You know? Very good.
Right.
Yes.
That's right.
Well, listen.
I'm writing
never
a book.
Say never, never say always. That's the way. You know what, Katie? You know what? I hear you. You know, I mean, that's about. You never say never, never say always. You know, because I've seen a lot of things that you would tell people the stories, and they'd be like, "No way." Like,
Well, it's like my wife and I are writing a story on Jack the Ripper. And to really do the research, we got a bunch of different books. We got into a lot of forums and a lot of groups on it. But one of the things we did is we found a map online of Whitechapel of that era so that we have all the right street names. We have all where the places were. We've marked where the killings were. We've put all the suspects, and we've looked at all the different theories, and we've come up with our story. But the thing...
Oh no!
For the second time tonight.
No.
Jack the Ripper's coming back and getting us.
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
He's
Katie,
done enough
you didn't channel him, did you?
Well, Rudy, we are actually past time, so do you want to, why don't we do final statements from everyone, and we can always hang out afterward.
Exactly.
All right, Joe, would you like to leave us with a final statement?
Sure. Research don't make it the 800-pound gorilla that a lot of people make it. Try to find people in your that you want to write. If you want to write about the Civil War, go online and find where these guys do the Civil War reenactments. You know, they're everywhere. So, and they're more than willing to talk to you. So I always prefer to do research with the experts in the field. But if not, you can go to this building called a library that a lot of people have forgotten about, and you can do your research that way too.
That's a great point.
Very good.
And even the dog agrees.
Katie, how about you?
Well, for me, it's just a matter of, because I don't write in such detail in terms of crime or anything like that. I think it's a matter of keeping it real, keeping it as close to real as possible, and it's a learning experience. So.
Well, it doesn't have to be crime. I mean, whatever you write in, you
yeah,
know, it would fit, right?
You have to keep it as close. My final statement would be: don't let your reader fall out of the story.
Okay.
They can't fall out of the story.
Very good. Marguerite.
Marguerite?
Well, I'm just going to. I'm a huge fan of research and just trying to have it right. Of course, we don't. I don't want to write stories that will bump my reader or whatever it is, even bore them. The key is to know your stuff, know what you're writing, and sprinkle the fun, the action, the set, the drama, whatever it is, throughout the entire story, and keep it at that. Just make sure you research.
Very good. So the main thing is don't bore them with it.
Yeah, no, yeah, don't.
No, because
don't do that.
we said before, some people get so in depth that you don't even know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Correct.
You know?
Yes. So
a good thing is when they
careful.
keep your interest going, they just about peaked where you peak. And that way, you know, you want a little more, but they're not going to give it to you at the moment. You know, so I think that's how I would look at it. if they go well over my head, I'm going to give up.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn to the last page, read the last page, and know what happened. You know.
Yeah.
So thank you, Harlan.
Yes. I would like to add for Katie that if you're going to write a channeler, the context in which the channeler speaks has to sound like a channeler. There may be some weird inflection in his or her speech, and they have to speak in a realm that sounds like a channeler. They have to sound as if they have the wisdom that a channeler would have. A channeler has a vast background.
Yeah, yeah.
And that you can call upon that when you're writing dialogue for a channeler. And I'm just fresh in meeting the ladies here, except for Marguerite. I know Marguerite from John's Hangout. And I'm sorry, I forgot your name there on the end.
Darcy.
Darcy, yes. All I remember is your smile. Your smile has more than its share of the world's teeth.
There you go. There you go.
Well, Harlan, I like your point, actually, that you made, and I think that that's something that applies everywhere. I found that even in the books I've written, that sometimes you can get caught up because you don't know how a person would say something. You know how you would say it, but that's not necessarily how someone else would say it. And I think that dialogue is an important point of research that people will often overlook. So I'd like to say that point before we end tonight, that don't just research the topic and the setting. Make sure you research how the people speak and what they would feel in that situation too. So, Rudy, I'm going to leave it to you to end the show tonight.
Well, yeah, John's back. Welcome back, John. We missed you. Joe, did you have something you wanted to add at one point? I saw your hand going up. No? Okay. Well, you know what? As usual, it was another successful show. Now, next week, we're kind of in a bind. We scheduled week 13, and week 13 was going to be books to script to movies. And there is not enough out there, it seems like, where people are happy with what that all means. And like I said, I have a son who's in the business, and I asked him for some help, and I think he ran the other way because the people he worked with that wrote a book, then it was made into a script and then into a movie, were disasters, it seemed like. The last one he did was Lovely Bones, which was a fantastic book, a first-time author with a best-selling novel, a super director, the man from the trilogy of The Rings, and yet what he made here was absolute nothing. I mean, he spent a lot of money, he made a lot of money, but the movie did not do the book justice, you know, because the book has 2 pages of her being in heaven, and his movie has 45 minutes of her being in heaven. That's not the way you want it. So that's going to be a hard subject to tackle. I think we have one person so far. If we can't make that any better, you know what? Nothing is written in stone. We will have to change our subject matter. And matter of fact, we have an alternate subject matter for next week. It's a lady that was on our show before, Catherine. And now there's this second lady that came up that has a similar circumstance. Catherine is chemical intolerances is her problem, where you heard of the boy in the bubble, and I hate to put it this way, but she's the lady in the bubble house, where she actually had to move out of her house, move into another house, just her, and you almost have to have the password and a spacesuit to go and visit her. And it's very sad, but a fantastic lady. Her outlook on life is unbelievable. And she now has a friend who is now down with, I believe it's cancer in her case, that's very just ravishing her. And yet the two of them are like the best people you would ever want to meet. You want to be a pick-me-upper? Talk to either one of them. And we're thinking about possibly having them on. And just this morning I came, they sent me a third name because they have a little networking where now people are coming out of the woodworks and saying, you know what, I've had this problem, but nobody would ever want to talk to me about it. They're finally getting together, and I think there has to be a time, whether we put them on next week or we put them on one of our shows in the next 13 weeks when we come back on, but I think it's a must. It's something we have to do, because to me that's just so uplifting. You know, if you're in the dumps, just listen to these people, and there's no reason for you to be in the dumps anymore. And you know, especially with us, look at around you. Everybody here tonight smiled. Everybody had a good time, and I like that. You know, maybe I'm not the best host as far as being by the book, but I do my research. You know, and we get that done. So with that, you know what? I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. This has been an enlightening for me. I may go back and rewrite the book a little bit, you know, and you know, I just thought it wasn't the proper thing to do. But you know what? My problem was I didn't ask an expert, and that's what we should do at times. You know, get off the high horse yourself and go ask somebody that knows a little bit more about it. And for that, I'm grateful tonight. I had people here that could give me that, you know, and I'll do it honestly, not whitewash it. I don't like that. With somebody, you know, I even wanted to get my book out there real fast to one of my church book clubs, and everybody warned me, don't do that, because those ladies aren't going to give you a bad review, no matter how bad it is. So my book is actually when it goes out, it's going out to Katie and her 260 women who are going to tear it apart, word by word. And if it survives that, you know what? I got a good chance. So, listen, I thank you very much. What's that?
But Katie, be nice.
He doesn't want that.
But I want to thank you all.
So be nice. I hope everyone had a good night tonight. I enjoyed having everyone here.
So with that, good night, and thank you again. And hopefully we'll see all of you again. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.